everybody, and welcome to A Nominee. I'm your host, Dan, and
I'm
your host. Oh, yep.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to leave me out. So.
No. I was trying to come up with a good introduction, but you're the other host. What more is there to say? And we have some very special guests on today. That seems to be a trend with recent episodes. We got John Sanborn returning. We've also got David Kulma and Dorian Wallace of the Trystero project, or the Trystero, or
we just say Trystero.
We'll explain it.
They're the part of the postal service that's working right now, basically. And so we're here to talk to them about that.
We await silently Trystero's empire. Did I remember it correctly? Waste, yep. Yeah. Okay, all right. Yep. Yeah, so this is the very special Thomas Pynchon episode. And as you can see, over here I've got Slow Learner.
There you go.
Nice.
I've got Vineland, of which I read the first 100 pages twice.
There you go.
I've got over here, I couldn't find my copy of V, and so instead I've got the complete works of William Shakespeare, which is about as long. I'm sorry, not Gravity's Rainbow.
Right. I got Gravity's Rainbow in the background.
Yeah, it's literally right behind your head.
I read 45 pages of Gravity's Rainbow, and then I realized I was still on page 15, so I was like, I need to do this another day.
There you go. You've only gotten through the parts of the banana breakfast.
Yeah. Why don't you take a whack at it? We'll just wait.
Well, that'll be our fundraiser episode. We'll just read the whole thing on air. It'd be like those Gertrude Stein things they do in New York, where they read all 950 pages of Making of Americans over like 3 days.
Oh wow!
Yeah, you ever been to one of those? It's like
that's gonna be amazing.
It's like going to church, but there's very different people there.
True.
Of course, there's the Crying of Lot 49, which is where we first get or learn about Trystero. What is introduced to.
So I guess what is the Trystero?
You want to go, David?
Sure. When Dorian and I were in school together at Kent State University in the music department, I think I was a first-year grad student. Dorian was somewhere near undergrad there. Mm-hmm. We started a concert organization that Dorian had done it sort of by himself one year when it was under a different name, and we and another friend of ours named Jason Clark renamed the group. The three of us liked the Crying Lot 49, so we called it Trystero. And then after that was just a year-long thing. And after that, when Dorian wouldn't stop bothering me for us to do things together, and we could never figure out what exactly to do, considering he lived in New York and I lived in Chicago at that point. We finally came together. I figured out that the thing we could do was perform Perfect Lives together. Huh. And so we just decided to keep the name Trystero because we couldn't think of anything better. Because it was an awesome name.
How did you guys first stumble on Perfect Lives, and then what instigated you to audaciously perform the piece?
So I guess I should still talk. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that good? So I'm the one who fell upon it. So I've been following, there's a composer, music critic, author named Kyle Gann. I've been following he's been blogged online for a long time. He was a music critic at the Village Voice in the 80s and 90s.
Also a composer.
Oh, yes, exactly. John and Kyle have collaborated. And
he wrote a full-length biography of Robert Ashley, too.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, so I was reading I was going back to one of his first books that I read, American Music in the 20th Century, I think it's called. And he talks about Ashley in that. And I had gone somewhere previous years and was just, I was collecting CDs from the library and burning them onto my computer. And I had that, and I was revisiting it, because I listened to it once and thought, what is this weird thing? But I was in Chicago and had nothing to do. And so I was listening to it again, and I realized, so Dorian and I it was hard for us to collaborate because I'm an oboe player, a classically trained oboe player, and Dorian is really, as a pianist, is more of a jazz improvising piano player. That's really where he sort of did most of his stuff. So finding ways for us to collaborate was basically impossible, although we're both composers.
Mhm.
So I realized listening to Robert Ashley talk about the beverage that he has as he's sitting in a hotel room, the character Raoul Desjardins, and went, I can do this. I can say this, and Dorian can be Blue Jean Tyranny. I just immediately had that thought. And I literally, I sort of tell this story there's a page on my website where I wrote something up about us doing this when Ashley died. And so I literally I messaged him on Facebook, and I put the little text up on there. And I said, Dorian, you and I should do this. And like an hour later, Dorian looked, okay, let me look at this. And then he said, I'm in, after he watched it. So
hold on, I'm going to your website
Right.
to find, because yeah, you had the whole description.
So I was expecting, oh God, we just fell in love with this piece and it's so intricate and influential. No, it was pretty transactional, it turns out.
Yeah, well, the thing is he had sent me a link to some of the videos.
It was I think it was just the video on YouTube of the park.
Mhm.
Like, so you can watch.
And it's so funny because the conversation, you can literally see, based on the timestamps, that David had sent it to me. I checked it out, I watched it, and then just responded with, "I'm down."
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and just to emphasize, so David and I come from very different backgrounds musically. I'm much more primarily self-taught, and you're much more primarily the traditional, like, school classical route.
Yep.
So I play a lot by ear, mostly. So I'm not very much a strong interpreter of music as far as written notation. But in regards to ear playing and responsive sort of to the improvisational, like, sonic realm, that's where my strength is. And Blue Jean Tyranny is one of the the masters of improvisational piano playing. There was actually one very funny thing. We did Perfect Lives. One of the times we did it in New York City. In the audience was John and Blue Jean and John's wife, Sarah Cahill. And Sarah is a concert pianist. And
Amazing.
oh yeah, like world renowned. And I had this strange realization where this is probably the only time I'll be performing where Sarah Cahill is the pianist I'm second most intimidated by, just because Blue was in the audience.
Right.
But both of them loved the performance, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, he does all that, and he acts with his hands too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's.
Oh yeah, it's
But it's also perfect because the character and the performance are not notated in any real specific way. I mean, there are tempo markings, there's a lot of notation, but not, typical notation. And a lot of it is about being able to help tell the story through the piano play.
So I should address your comment about transactional. So the only reason I knew about it is because I was reading a book where Kyle Gann says Robert Ashley is the most important opera composer of the 20th century, full stop. So the only reason I know about it is because it's important enough that someone wrote about it. So
I think that's how that's how I found it. It was like mentioned, I think I was reading an interview with somebody in one of those like avant-garde film interview journal type things.
Mm-hmm.
They mentioned it offhand and I was like, spoken word opera, TV, I'm there. I think I was like obsessed with Gary Shandling at the time. So I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be like the next It's Gary Shandling show, right? Or something like that. And I think they both had a big impact on it, but I think they're very different things in the end. But I ended up liking both of them quite a bit. But yeah, it's like not the kind of thing. Somebody's got to leave it somewhere for you to find it.
Right. Yeah, it's basically an underground cult classic. It's like you just every conversation I've had with people about Robert Ashley has been either who or oh my God, yes. Right.
And they usually don't know exactly why they are so entrapped by his gravity. I mean, they can speak about various compositional strategies, his intersection with other elements of the musical avant-garde in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But for the most part, when you get hooked by Bob, you're hooked by things that you're not quite sure where his connection to you is and vice versa. At least I find that with a lot of people. So Steve Coward, who's out here at Mills College, has performed and or conducted a number of Bob's works and knew Bob very, 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 very well, and still can't really tell you in plain language what that love or that adoration is all about. And I think that's part of why Bob is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul Pinto of Verispeed, who is, another Ashley head, is I guess what we'll say. But he and I were hanging out one time, and we were just talking about Perfect Lives, and it's just so interesting, speaking about just staring at this text like over and over and over again, especially in the performance zone, because you're in this space when you perform, and you're just reading these words that Bob has written, and Paul. Like we were just talking about how, because I think it was like the 7th time I had performed the piece at this point, and he and I were talking about it and just how it gets deeper each time. And Paul was like, yeah, it's like the fucking Bible or quantum physics. It just gets deeper and deeper the more, the first time you read it, it's surface level. Like, it's like, oh, this is really cool. But like, by the 7th time, it's like, wait, you're telling me that, it's just all of a sudden you see all these connecting dots that you never saw the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th time.
John Cage did say, why do we need the Bible when we have perfect lives?
Yeah.
Right.
Very famously. But also, I asked Bob, why television? And you'd have to really squeeze Bob to extract sort of things that weren't even more opaque than the things you were asking questions about. But he said basically it's the framework of like Dallas or Dynasty. You've got an enclosed space, a town. You've got a set of sort of marginal everyday characters whose interaction have archetypal implications, but are pretty straightforward. It's got crime, it's got love, it's got sex, it's got reincarnation, it's got dogs, it's got a lot of things.
Even got commercial breaks.
And he wrote, he wrote it so that there you could insert commercials into it. It fades to black, or it pauses, but this idea of a self-contained kind of pedestrian world, on top of which there are these very mythic and classic themes. So in some ways, the television aspect, I think, was based on his, he loved television. I used to watch television, particularly sports on television with him a great deal. But
he played a lot of football, didn't he?
He wasn't the captain of the football team.
He was not the captain of the football team.
Okay. He was not the captain of the football team. But he loved the medium. And when we had our first meeting with Dean Winkler up at Teletronics, which did look like the Starship Enterprise, because behind glass doors were all the 1-inch machines, and then there a huge switcher and the digital devices, and then all the different screens. I think Bob felt like he had died and gone to television heaven.
So actually, just talking about Perfect Lives and television operas. So you have a video opera that the three of you worked on together. The Rest is Shit: Stories from the Microcosm. Now, okay, so I watched the pilot. Was there more than the pilot filmed, or just the pilot? Oh, because I'm like, I want more, I want more. So, what was the genesis of this? How did this start?
Dorian immediately thought that we should make our own opera when we brought up Perfect Lives.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a little bit. There's a little more nuance to it. It was that David and I had been speaking for a long time about collaborating on an opera, but just something of our own. And when we had performed Perfect Lives the first time, David, I believe you on the plane back to.
Oh yeah, so it wasn't the first time. It was so we've only done it full all the way through twice. But every other time we've basically done the park or another episode.
Episodes, yeah.
Yeah, just chunks. But no, it was one of the times we did it in New York. I think it was the first time we did the park in New York. And I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right.
And so I was on a plane back, and I was sitting there thinking about it, and I literally wrote the text of the first longer segment. I can't remember what we called them. The first episode, which is only like 10 minutes.
The street.
Yeah, the street. I wrote that on the plane.
Oh,
the text of that.
Yeah,
and then like I end up writing what it's just like. There's text for like 2.5 hours or something. It's just, but we got Dorian got a commission from Experiments in Opera to make this video opera a small thing, and he decided that the thing he wanted to do with it was for us to work with, because John had contacted Dorian out of the blue somehow.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Was I'm on Facebook and I get a friend request from John Sanborn, and it's one of those like, wait, John hold on, and like I like look at, and it's like, holy fuck, and I like text David that it's like John Sanborn just friend requested me, and he was like, well, accept it, and I hit accept, and then John pops up on the messenger, and he's like, hey, saw you do Perfect Lives. It was like, hi, and like there's that whole like there are a couple of I mean, it's funny when we say famous people, because it's like famous in this strange, bizarre, avant-garde world, but there are a couple of very notable times when I've met a famous person and like had to pretend to be cool. John was one of them. The other, just so you know, was not Alvin Ailey. Sorry, Alvin Lucier. When we were up at Wesleyan, like everyone was like, "Yeah, we're going to Alvin's house after this," and I was like, "Oh, cool."
That's funny. My roommate studied with him actually over at Wesleyan. Yeah, that was the first thing we talked about. He moved in the day the pandemic started. I showed him like a bit of the Robert Ashley thing because he mentioned like, "Oh, I studied with Alvin Lucier," and he went back to playing Zelda. But it was a nice moment.
Well, it's on a quick side note with that was, Alvin's there in his 80s for this Robert Ashley symposium in his cane with his Black Lives Matter hoodie. It was just like, it was just awesome. But yeah, so John had reached out, basically we nerded out about Perfect Lives, and I believe, John, you had said like we should collaborate, and it was like, yeah. And then Experiments in Opera, I had gotten a call from one of their directors, Jason Cady, and he was like, hey, we're doing this video opera series. Like we thought you would be a good fit for this. Do you have any projects that you were thinking about? And it was like, actually, yes. And because David and I had been sort of looking at the script and looking at musical material, keeping it in the improvisational vein, but then expanding it to something bigger, and it kind of all the pieces fell together. It was like commissioned to be able to pay for the first 3 little segments.
After Perfect Lives was done, and there was this kind of resonance happening, Bob kind of assumed that a lot of us would kind of continue working, being in his band. And I thought about it, and I participated in some of the work on Atalanta and improvement, but I was going in a different direction. And the 5 years that I worked on Perfect Lives in one way or another, and particularly at the very end when we were for a year intensely making the opera for television, you get very close to a mentor, and at some point you kind of go through your mentor. You pass through their body, you pass through their reputation, you pass through the ghost of expectations that they created. Same thing happened for me with Nam June Paik. And you come out the other side. And a lot of what you bring to the occasion of when you're working with someone you admire, you take some of that along with you. And then you also, there's a lot of invention that happens, and then you say, well, this is mine, and I'm gonna walk away with this. So for a long period of time, I'd see Bob, I'd see Mimi, I'd see everybody else who was in the band. And it was, it was all great. And then I moved to California. And when I moved to California, I realized that I should have stayed closer to Bob. And I don't know what that would have turned into, but we had a correspondence in the early 90s about my trying to get a piece of his and raise money so that I could produce it, not necessarily with him performing it. And at one point he had a recording and the libretto for El Aficionado, which I really, really, really liked. And I tried for 2 years to raise some money because I wasn't established enough in the Bay Area, and the digital tools weren't it was the early days of QuickTime. And it kind of lapsed. And later, when he got sick, and it was kind of well known that he was not in good shape, just the regret fell on me like an avalanche of shit. And I called him once and I said, Bob, I'm just really, 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 really sorry that we didn't get a chance to do something else. And he said, well, you can always do something after I'm gone. And I don't remember when it was, but Ned Sublette decided he wanted to do a Spanish version of Perfect Lives. And Peter Gordon got involved, and I can't think of the name of the guy who directed it and was sort of the...
Alex Waterman?
Yeah, Alex Waterman. And I thought, well, this is curious, but I'm not sure why they're translating it into Spanish, because the text is so brilliant and so strong. And I got the feeling after a while that part of it was also, how do you pick up a work that's so closely identified with the composer? This happens with dance, where the choreographers are, they die. And in some cases, like Trisha Brown, they've left explicit instructions that that's it. Nobody does these dances ever again. The opposite is Cunningham, where he created this entire foundation and intricate mechanism to preserve the works and to a certain extent perpetuate them. So I threw some money at Waterman and Ned and saw the results and thought, well, I make better television. But I also liked some of the choices that they had made regarding the performance. But it still felt like it owed more to Bob and Blue than it was establishing its own kind of credibility. So when I heard that Dorian and David were doing it, I knew that what Dorian was doing was very different. I didn't know David quite so much. And yes, with Dorian, I had an idea for a half-hour opera based on the Temptation of St. Anthony. And he said, okay, sure. And I fed him the libretto. And I think the same week that you guys were performing the entirety of Perfect Lives. No, maybe this isn't true. No, we shot the shit when you were doing Perfect Lives, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. We all went to New York. So while you were doing Temptation of St. Anthony, that's when the condition rolled in for this other thing. So we planned us to record and to tape all the visuals and the audio for The Rest Is Shit, the pilot, while the weekend we were in New York.
But Dorian and I wrote this opera. I created video for it. It actually premiered at the end of 2016 in France and has been shown in a bunch of other places as an installed work.
It's actually like musically a traditional opera. It's for string orchestra and like singers. So there's no improvisation in that one.
No, but Pamela Z plays the devil, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily completely kosher. And in theory, we're working on a new piece called Fantomas.
Right.
So after the French movie?
Yes.
Well,
the
character.
Oh yeah, I got a big poster of that guy over my bed. Stares at me while I'm sleeping.
I want to get one for Dorian that just keeps looking down at him, saying, "Write the opera, write the opera, write the opera." But then, the rest is shit. I thought, well, this is really interesting, and not to say that it is entirely in the shadow of Perfect Lives, but it just seemed to make sense to flash forward 30, 40 years, work with two people who understand Ashley on a piece that could be put side by side with Perfect Lives, but have a much more contemporary, gritty, semi-realistic feeling. There are a lot of aspects to The Rest Is Shit that relate very, very much to both the storytelling and the characters in an environment. The narrator has a lot of the same attributes as the narrator in Perfect Lives has, and then the piano work, the way that the band operates, although it's different in lots of ways, there's a structural element both visually and musically that's very relatable in terms of Perfect Lives. So it seemed like a good idea, and one of the parts is a pop song about sugar.
Right, I saw that. That was I like any kind of music about food. Like Weird Al. I love Weird Al. He's the only guy who's willing to sing about it. Everybody falls in love, but everybody's already heard a song about falling in love. Everybody eats. You don't hear.
Yeah,
it's just radio silence.
Do you know the Kurt Cobain conversation with Weird Al? I guess Smells Like Teen Spirit had come out, and Weird Al had reached out to Kurt Cobain, and Kurt was really into the idea of a parody, but he was like, it's not going to be another one about food, is it? At that point, he had done Eat It and Girls Just Want to Have Lunch. And,
right.
Yeah.
It's the Ryer the Kaiser theme from Rocky VIII.
The money for the commission to do the thing was not terribly robust.
No.
But we found good ways to take advantage of circumstances, and yes, it was weekend, or was around the time when they were performing Perfect Lives, and I think Mimi and Bob had seen you guys perform, and the word was that Bob was very pleased, and I thought, well, it would be great for me to see a lot of the people, because I don't get that much of an opportunity to kind of get the band back together. So Mimi, Carlotta, Blue, Dean, David, who else was there?
Was David there? I don't remember if David was there.
It was just a really lovely performance in a really intimate, genuine space, and everyone really, I mean, obviously we went out afterwards and sobbed because Bob had passed away, but it was very touching and it was very memorable. And I was also incredibly impressed that David memorized the entire libretto.
Wait, for real?
Yeah, I'm the only person that does that.
How many index cards did it take?
Oh, well, I I didn't transfer the index cards, but it's like it took years for me to memorize it on and off, you know. So it's like, well, so the thing I should mention at this point is that so the thing that some of the other people who are reviving Perfect Lives they're doing, we've taken it. The tack we've taken that's different than everybody else is that Dorian ostentatiously contacted Bob Ashley immediately when we had this idea.
Which
and
that was a surreal experience after listening to the record on repeat and then calling Bob Ashley, and the guy on the record sounds exactly the same.
It's exactly the same.
Hey, how's it going?
So the idea we had was that we wouldn't slavishly reproduce it. We wouldn't do a transcription. We would take the idea that Bob had of the template where you have a set pattern of ways you're going to make it live using the text as the basis. And then we would create our own template based upon sort of doing what we thought would make sense for the story and the styles, because the Perfect Lives in many ways is just sort of a grab bag of musical styles that were available in the late 70s and early 80s. That's sort of what blues and Peter Gordon seems to have chosen what to do with. And
right, it's almost like he's sampling. Like I feel like there's a lot of parallels between what he was doing, what was going on in hip hop at the time. You know, they sound so different on record.
When you do interview Blue and hopefully Peter again, ask them about the organ.
The organ, okay.
Yeah. The organ is it's almost its own character in the music because they used it to make very specific. They would use the organ. It's basically its rhythmic looping mechanism that it had to create the sort of the grid that they improvised on top of and structured the music around. Anyway, they know more about that. I just only know from like third hand. But so we threw basically all of that out and did our own template just using the same text. And my idea was just that Bob Ashley in the 60s was this conceptual performance artist in Michigan around Ann Arbor doing crazy, the really strange things that when you watch the video of Perfect Lives, it's sort of, he's just standing in front of a microphone and reading off of cue cards, which is a particular kind of, especially in his later operas that get performed, because he never got enough money again to make another television video version of an opera, that they have this kind of static visual. And I thought the thing that's interesting about his stuff before that was that there was anything goes in a certain sense in live performance. And I'm like, well, the only way I could do that is if I memorized the text so I could walk around. And so that allows me then to interact with the dancer and dance. We have a dancing friend, Diane Skirbick, who works with us. And then I have umbrellas or oranges, or I walk around and pick things up and do lots of crazy stuff. So I memorized with the specific purpose of trying to inject some, for lack of a better term, performance art. And then that allows me to play some of the instruments. So I play along with Dorian sometimes on the keyboard.
And then as far as instrumentals go, there's something really interesting about improvising and accompanying to storytelling, but creating it as music. It's like, because we always say music is a language, but it's like, what if language is music?
Right, it's almost like eurythmy or something like that.
Right.
Oh, and another element that we haven't even mentioned about Perfect Lives and the Rest is Shit was, New York City has just a large community of, I'll call them avant-garde free improvisers. There's just, this is literally the city that people come to pursue this, if you call it a career, but just like this is where people
hobby.
Do this. Yeah,
Compulsion.
Yeah, a hobby that takes up all. Yeah. The
IRS calls it a hobby.
Yeah. So we've added in a lot of friends of mine who I play in other settings with, to the experience, and it's very cool. Like for instance, um, in the supermarket episode 2, there's a thematic theme. That thematic theme. There's a motif.
The best kind.
Yeah, there's a motif that takes place. And I'm not going to get the pitches right, but it's F, A flat, and C. It's just there, da da da,
Right.
and it's just that's it. And so we have these two great saxophone players who join on that, and it's Michael Eaton and Lathan Hardy, and they're both just musical. They're like, oh, you need me to connect to the ether? No problem, man. Like, they're just very spiritually connected to like whatever that extra something is. And we told them, it was like, here's the theme. It's F, A flat, and C, and then here's the text. Like, other than that, it's free game. And we improvise and we work with it. And like, Lathan is just as much a musician as he is a performance artist. He goes out in the crowd and blows his saxophone in people's faces, and just all that sort of stuff. And each episode we had a different group of musicians come and play. My personal favorite, like they all have very meaningful things, but my personal favorite is for the bar. We used Brad Whiteley, who's a really, really amazing piano player here in the city. He's the keyboardist for Regina Spektor.
Oh.
Yeah, like he's her piano player in her band.
Oh, right, because she was one of those sidewalk cafe people, right?
Yeah. But we had him, and we basically did dueling pianos, which is like really freaking fun, because there's like certain things in the world of piano, like we like it's like everyone understands music, everyone understands like things that sound right, things that don't sound right, but there's something about piano players, we never really get to play with another piano player, because guitar players, they can do it all the time, horn players all the time, but pianists, like, we're never like with another person. So it's
Why do you think that is?
Size of the instrument. Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
Oh, I was joking.
Yeah, I realized. Went right
It's all good. So you're playing piano with this other guy.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, was that right?
But yeah, I've been to plenty of piano bars that there's always, they have dueling pianos. There's, I don't see the big deal. There's always a two piano.
Right. But it was just such a cool experience to, sort of explore with the idiomatic elements of the instrument. It's like there are things that just feel good that on the piano that doesn't work on another instrument, and it's like really cool to like play this like really hip blues lick and then like have it played right back to you, that like when you're not playing it, from the other guy, because he knows it too. And it's just it was a lot of fun.
I've seen videos from some of the other groups that are performing Perfect Lives, but what I liked about what Dorian and David did was the fluidity. It was a very, very fluid interpretation. It did feel like Next Generation. It did feel like that the recontextualization based on what had happened between the beginning of the 1980s and when they were starting to perform it, they had incorporated a lot of that musical and cultural information into their presentations. I'm not saying anything disparaging about the others, but it's not an antique. It's not a precious, it's not Shakespeare. It's not a precious heritage heirloom that needs to be put pristinely on a plinth for display. It's got so much common sense, human conditioned elements baked into it. Yes, it is a very dense mix of references. It is Pynchon-esque. It's very much James Joyce in a certain way, and I know that Bob had Joyce in mind when he started writing what became the series of works that started with Perfect Lives. But I didn't feel like these guys were treating it with kid gloves or kind of a precious approach. They were just slamming into it as you would learn like a pop song, or as you would learn a standard, or as you would learn anything, for the joy of playing it as much as the respect in getting involved in it. And those two things, I think, have to go together, because after Bob and Blue had played this thing for 7 years, like for such a long time, there was an ease between the two of them that was not to be missed. It was a not inconsiderable dynamic between the two of them, where, again, Blue's playing a character, Bob is playing a character. Both of them are based on who they are, but Bob has created this fictional wrapper for them. And within that wrapper, they get to do what it is they do, which is absolutely, hypnotizing, fantastic, and incredibly inspiring.
Yeah, the thing I will say about the sort of, it's sort of like 3.5 contemporary groups that are revisiting this work, and it's Vetus Perfectus, Verispeed,
Matmos has done it a couple times, right?
Yeah. Matmos, and then
Matmos.
us.
Okay.
And I don't know the Matmos version really at all, but the thing that I think each group adds that is so unique to it is, the Vetus Perfectus. There's such a love of the production of Bob Ashley, and then the Verispeed version, it feels so just the energy, like it's very punk rock, whereas David and I, it's like the process, like where we found it's really cool that we all found different things from Bob's original work and played with it. But David and my version, it's definitely about the process of the creation and the
Right.
live experience.
Right. So the thing we took is that way of making the piece, and then because we're not Blue Jean Tyranny and Robert Ashley ourselves, the thing that comes out is different. I just happen to be saying the same words.
But there's a danger in trying to echo or copy. There's also there's a courage necessary to stake out your own interpretation. Dancers I know, one in particular who's been involved in a lot of the Cunningham Resurrection works, everyone is absolutely terrified that they're going to do it wrong. And at some point, you can hear Merce Cunningham saying, no, you're not, that's not it. You're not supposed to be treating this like a holy relic. You're supposed to be dancing. And that can be problematic. You can inadvertently step over the line by being too timid.
Right.
John, actually between John and David, what you said, John, you mentioned earlier about it's not an antique and it's not Shakespeare, but David, you said that it's all the same words, but everything, unique. I saw a Shakespeare performance, I saw Taming of the Shrew set in 1950s Italy.
Right.
You can actually, some people will actually, do different things, and it's very much, you see, oh, that's 1950s Italy.
Right, it's like the Orson Welles Othello with 3 Desdemonas. Although I don't think that was intentional. I think that was money, but
I think there are times where the text provides a basic guidance, and then whoever is doing the interpretation is looking for tone. Mm-hmm. And the tone can be, we're going to put it in Little Italy in the 60s or whatever it happens to be. Or the tone can be exactly what part of the mind and soul is this piece talking to. Mm-hmm. And I think Perfect Lives has so much to say with, the incredible velvet voice of Bob Ashley and the piano stylings of Blue Jean Tyranny. But you've all said it, you've listened to the work a number of times. It is a compulsive piece. Yeah. Almost all of Bob's works, there's a compulsion to listen again, to listen deeper, and it comes from unexpected places. And that has to do, I think, with the tone that's baked into the original. And then the question of interpretation is, all right, where am I going to start this thing and where am I going to end it? and the different instrumentation, David's desire to actually be able to perform it, not necessarily, you know, there was a part of Bob that we styled him as a talk show host. Yes, I made him look like Doris Day, but also there was a lot of Johnny Carson dialed into that.
Yeah. He's
right?
got that ease with the microphone.
Yeah, and also any ruffles or any wrinkles were already written into the script.
Yeah.
The way that he presents it is it's an undeniable rush of language.
Right.
And you don't understand it, but you're listening to the music, or the music is drawing you into the specifics of the words, and they become either illuminating or not. But I'm just happy.
Well, I think it's.
I'm happy that we're talking about it. I'm happy if, as the decades go on, more and more people, you know, not that you guys are old, but like, you know, kids in their 20s start performing Perfect Lives. Because they see in it what Bob put into it and what we brought out when we made it for television.
Well, I think it was interesting you described it like that, because a lot of my initial attraction to the speech or to the piece was the involuntary speech angle, because I've had like fits of involuntary speech, and it captures like perfectly the weird sense of disorientation that comes from kind of seeing language coming out, like seeing sound coming out of yourself as a foreign object. And like, even when you're not getting like the deeper levels of it, that spoke to me kind of like immediately. And I think that's what got me in the way you were describing it, like it's very similar.
A secret of Perfect Lives also, when you think about it as a television opera, is that everything is being seen by a camera. If you use that as a filter in which to strain the entire opera, it's each character has their own camera. You know, a close-up, an arm, big muscles gone to see.
Yeah, right.
At first we read Rodney. The design looks Chinese. Flash powder.
Tattoo.
It's all being seen by a camera. And the camera cuts and the camera moves. There's a montage within the text. I want to tell one story about when we did The Rest Is Shit, because I tried explaining it to these guys what I thought it would look like, and I don't know if they understood it, but I said I want there to be a lot of devices and different screens that we're seeing as we're looking at the opera. And one of the things I wanted to do, particularly for the pop song, the Sugar Song, is I love using bodies as screens. Mm-hmm. And I wanted a very voluptuous female nude as a screen, and I wanted to project video on the nude, and I wanted to rephotograph it, because what I wanted was this, you know, sugar is sex, sex is sugar. So I found this amazing black woman who was an assistant to a friend of mine, really delightful. And I asked her, you know, are you into this? And she said, oh, yes, 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 I love your work. So she came to the studio and we did it. So I'm putting projections of David's face and Dorian's keyboards on her body, and I'm making these kind of dense compositions so that you're seeing the performances of the work, but you're seeing it all modeled on and shaped by her body. And we finish it, and the people who did the commission had a screening set up. And we sent the 3 pieces off, and they were like incredibly happy. And they looked at the Sugar Song and they were like, oh God, this is really sexy and sensual, and oh, wow, wow, wow. And then somehow, like 48 hours later, they came back and said, no, it's sexist and racist and we can't accept it. And I was really upset because I've used male and female nudes for a while in various shapes and forms. And a lot of times I'm projecting video onto bodies. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, this is bad. I wrote back and I said, if I did the same thing with a male nude, how would that? Oh, that would be fine. That would be just fine. So I asked Carlos Ventura, who's a friend of mine, who's a really handsome man, who often plays me as he's my surrogate in works that I've made, because he's much better looking than I am. So I reshot the entire thing with Carlos and projected onto Carlos's body, and then put that together. This is like in 48 hours.
Yeah.
And sent it back out, and everybody was fine with it.
It was an interesting experience because I actually remembered getting the draft, the original draft, and having this sort of like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with this, but we'll see how it goes. And we sent it out, and the executives initially were cool with it, but then a couple of the composers saw it and had very visceral responses. And John and David and I, after having like a little meeting to discuss it, it was like, okay, like, even if we're okay with this, and even if the actress is, comfortable with this, the fact that the fact that it was interpreted not by one, not by two, but by, many colleagues of ours in a certain way, it was like, we can't be another group of three white guys saying like, oh, you all just don't get it, like, you're being too sensitive. It was like, okay, like, it's being perceived this way. And so that was why we decided to try another route, and it was interesting, just seeing the cultural response. And I mean, fast forward, look at the state of the world we're in right now. Like, we have an actual fascist president. Like, we we actually have blatant Nazis just out. So it's like, it is interesting how the piece really did tap into our own, I guess, our own ignorance and all of that, but also just how we really did decide it was like, okay, like, we have to be responsible with this, and I think we made the right choice. Now, that being said, the audience in France, very different response.
Well, and also many of my friends who just looked at it as what it is were, why do they want you to change this? This is incredibly beautiful. This is Carlos, as a nude man, is unbelievably beautiful and sexy. So I was willing to trade sexy for sexy. I think the filter, and I think we did the right thing in terms of respecting the response, because if anything you're doing doesn't get the response because you're putting up a barrier to that communication, you need to figure out how to actually bring the barrier down in one way or another.
Right. So the other
you got all the like cultural associations with like brown sugar too.
Well, the both of the, we didn't say brown sugar, but Carlos is.
But there's like, I mean, they're being used as like a projector, and then they're being used as like a baking sheet for like equal.
I don't think it was. It was never meant to be that explicit. It was meant to be something where the addiction to sugar is like sex, and you can get exactly the same feeling from Carlos because he's unbelievably sexy. He's brown skinned. He's a gay man, and he wasn't afraid of Dorian's fingers going over his dick.
So
on the projections, but when you're doing something, I mean, and Bob probably would have just told everybody to go fuck themselves, but because that was a very Bob Ashley thing as well. But when you realize that you've created a barrier to the effectiveness of something, no matter what the reason is or how you feel about it, it makes sense to go back and say, well, I'm gonna opt for communication as opposed to miscommunication or non-communication.
So the other portion is that at the end of the street, the opening episode, that is packaged with sugar and what's the other one is the short is called
the subway.
Yeah, it's not called the subway though.
No, but
I haven't thought about it in a moment. But anyway, the end of the street is a direct reference to Black Lives Matter stuff going on, and it was made clear to us that the way that sugar was shot originally was in the eyes of some of the people that saw it was going to undermine the message that the street episode had done. Mm-hmm. And that's not something any of us wanted to do.
No, it's not. But at the same time, you can make a choice that you think is the right choice artistically. But I think, and this is not just our time, that choice has to sit inside of a social setting.
Right.
Like I said, I'm fine with trading sexy for sexy, because Carlos, to me, looks just as great as the female nude. So, but at the same time, it was kind of a shock, and it was also, again, my European friends were, and I've done a collage where I've taken both versions, and so it's a mix of male and female nudes, and I play that a lot in Europe. But they were all kind of dumbfounded about exactly what was going on. And it says as much about our prejudices as it does about our freedoms.
But yeah, you get like this sense, like with the political situation of, right, there's all those postmodernist authors that say that the language is basically in competition with reality. Images want to take over reality. They don't want to describe reality. And yeah, there's a lot of this kind of response of, if I respond vehemently or passionately enough to this image, that's the same thing as praxis.
It's called
the image at the video's one, basically, where the subordinate organism.
Usually most of our episodes, it's Dan and I watch a movie and then we talk about it. So Dan will go and analyze it and all these different ways and bring in some of the history and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. And he says, "Ron, what do you think?" And I'm like, "I liked it."
Yeah, I can tend to be a bit inscrutable. So my chicks dig it.
My interpretation of the rest is shit. I liked it. But I was saying, I want more. I wanted to devour it. So actually, why is there only a pilot? Where's the rest? When's it coming?
They paid for the pilot.
I'm working on a project now. I've been working for the last year and change with the residents on a variety of different things, and they are about to shoot a movie, and part of the movie has to do with a project that they started but left unfinished back in the 1970s called Vileness Fats. And I realized that there are places in one's career for unfinished business, projects that shouldn't necessarily be completed, that become part of the canon of who you are and how you got there. And Vileness Fats is absolutely plays that role. So maybe someday there'll be more of the rest is shit, or maybe the pilot is just enough.
Well, there's something like fascinating about incompleteness too, right? Like it gives you a lot more ways you can digest the thing. You're not necessarily digesting it. Give it like I'm thinking about listening to Brian Wilson bootlegs when I was a teenager, right? Like you're trying to figure out what the hell's Smile gonna sound like from these 30-second clips of barbershop, whatever. And I think it adds to the mystery sometimes, right? Like it makes it more of it's almost interactive in a way. Like you have to finish it,
right?
Like they used to do that with the productions of Mystery of Edwin Drood, the Dickens thing that was writing when he died, and there's 8 different songs at the end, and the audience votes, and they only ever get to see one song.
So think of the rest of shit as opera -1.
So the reason and the main reason it hasn't been, but the next step has not been taken, is that it's mainly that Dorian and I live very far away from each other. I live in Cleveland, Ohio now, but I'm in Columbus at the moment because I'm now in graduate school, and Dorian has just finished up being in school for how long was it, Dorian?
4 years.
Yeah, so like therapy. So all of these things put together means that it's not like Dorian and I can show up somewhere and like work on something, because the nature of doing the improvised part was that the way we figured out Perfect Lives, where we were together over a summer for 6 weeks, and we were able to like build the idea and learn how to learn the piece together.
There's something really interesting about improvisational work where the notes may not be the thing that's set in stone, but having a strong foundation on what you can use in that space, like developing the vocabulary. Because improvisation, when set completely free, though it's a beautiful experience, and there's some amazing experiences for playing and for listening and for all of that, it can get meandering. It can get, dull. It can have moments of like not sure where it's going to go, and not necessarily in like the good way. But there's something about when you lay down sort of it's like making a building or creating a painting, like when you or I mean doing a film like pre-production. It's like you may not know what's actually going to happen once it starts, but just having like a template established really helps. And just the fact that David and I haven't been able to jam very much just because of the distance, finding out like what works, what doesn't work. Because the biggest thing is, when we'll do a first jam session, it's oftentimes I'm overplaying and David is either just getting through the text as fast as possible or not sure how to respond to my overplaying. But then once we have done it, together for a while, we start to find that breathable space. I don't know. Is that a good explanation?
Good to me.
Where in the end, it's Dorian and I could randomly show up in a city and perform at least one episode of Perfect Lives at the drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. But we just don't get the opportunity very often. We were supposed to perform it again in March.
For the 90th birthday of Bob Ashley.
Yeah. But that got shut down because of COVID.
Yeah.
And not enough hats.
And doing it over Zoom doesn't quite capture...
No, we've attempted some improvisation simultaneously on Zoom, on like live streaming. It was a strange experience.
Actually, I will just let you know this, David, is I've learned how to improvise over Zoom.
Oh, there you go.
So, we'll talk.
Well, there's also the fact that Dorian's wife is going to have a baby in like impendingly, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
In like 5 days, maybe.
Oh God, yeah, right,
like,
yeah.
It's like that soon.
She's that pregnant, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. So you've got the bag ready and everything?
It's all we're ready to walk out the door.
Any moment's notice, yeah.
Well, it's funny, yeah. Like she'll literally just be like, and it's like, "Are you okay? Are you going into labor?" And she's like, "I'm just stretching my arm." Like, it's like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Okay, well, you've got to improvise right now. You've got to do your jam session because you're not going to be able to after 5 days.
Right. That's true. That's true.
And spoiler, we scripted this entire episode. You wouldn't believe it from the naturalism on display, but we fooled you.
Yeah, we laid the template out.
Yeah. It took me 6 months to learn my part.
It is pretty remarkable watching David perform Perfect Lives live. It's one of my favorite experiences. Is we were at it's a venue that has now moved to another space called Spectrum. It's a living room concert hall. It's basically this guy who's he owns he's somehow involved with biotech. He's a scientist and he just loves avant-garde music. So he turned his apartment into a concert space. So we were there and we were doing the church, and there's this moment where it's myself and
it's Max and Carl.
Yeah, drummer named Max Maples and a bass player Carl Limbacher, and we're just like in this like zone, and David has forgotten the words, and he just like stops, and he stands there, and we're all just like on this vamp, just like, oh my God, is he like? Is the show over? Like, as David's brain just completely exploded, and David just like stops, and he sits, and he starts to get ready to speak, and he stops, and he like contemplates for a second, and he closes his eyes, and he breathes, and he opens his eyes, and all of a sudden, boom, and like it's just like completely back in, and like it was one of those like, you know, all it was like a jazz set, like all three of us were just like, wow, like, you know, screaming at like the people who know. Yeah, people in the audience who know the text were freaking out. Like, it was amazing.
We were video recording from behind Dorian's behind where Dorian was, so you could watch him play the piano. It's on my computer somewhere, but you can see him look directly at look directly at Carl, and they kind of like, what's going on? They look worried. Then I start again, and they both look at each other and go, yeah, it's like, wow, okay.
You know, right. You've gotten unplugged for a moment.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing I figured out later, what I did is I got to the right, I had said all the words I was supposed to, and then I wasn't sure that the next words that were coming to my brain were the right words. And it took me about 30 seconds to realize that that's what had happened.
You ever watch Sherlock when he goes into his mind palace?
Oh, yeah, right.
Kind of what it was like.
Yeah. So I didn't believe that the next words that were supposed to come out of my mouth were the right words.
Yeah.
But then I was able to do that, because that's the fastest one. That has the most words in it. You're just going like a new songs are. Oh my God, it's just like it goes nuts, really fast.
Could you demonstrate a segment of it?
That one? Oh shit! I haven't practiced that in a bit. Well, no, I could do so the one that I can always do off the top of my head is I haven't actually thought this in like weeks. I've been having to think about like 19th century French music. She makes double life. She makes two from one and one. She's a perfect system every day. She makes it work. She stands there in the doorway of her mother's house, looking at the grass, the sky, and where they meet, and never once thinking thoughts like, it's so like a line, or the distance is so powerful, or which way shall I take to leave? My mind turns to my breath, one. My mind watches my breath, two. My mind turns and watches my breath, three. I'm going to stop. That's the beginning of the Backyard. Too fast.
God, this is so sentimental. Dear George.
Dear George, what's going on? I'm not the same person I used to be. Right. My favorite thing about learning, like my favorite thing to do every once in a while is like because I've had to spin over the text so many times over my life, that every once in a while I realize I make a new connection in my brain, and I tell Dorian about it, and he just goes, huh? Like I literally tell him, it's like, you know that thing where I say 2 G's? I'm literally saying how many G's there are in the word eggs.
G's and eggs, 1 G and father.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's just like, you think it, like if you're thinking too hard, you think it's supposed to be something profound. And then no, it's not profound. It's just the number of letters in egg or in fog. And then you realize that in itself is profound.
It's also Bob's fascination with consciousness.
Right.
And how you trace consciousness, what happens to consciousness. And if you think of at the end of the Backyard that the male figure and the female figure are going to go into the next life. It's the end. The Backyard is the slow disconnection of consciousness from the body. Yeah. And then, boom, you're right back in the park, and you're in the motel room. You're having a little tumbler of vodka, and you're waiting for the phone to ring.
Well, there's, I think it is it's either in the church or, which is episode 5?
The living room.
It's the one where, they're having the conversation.
Yeah. I think it is the church, but there's the one part where all of a sudden Raoul turns into Bob, and he realizes that he's sitting in front of his typewriter writing this experience. And it was one of those things, like, I've played this text so many times, and it's like I didn't notice it until like the like eighth or ninth time we had played it.
Yeah, that's at the end of the church.
The church, yeah, that's when it is. But the thing that's so incredible about the text is, if you ever get involved in like a meditation or a mindfulness practice, that's where your mind truly wanders. Like you'll literally be sitting with your eyes closed, and you just you have sex with like 15 people. You think about like that argument you had with so and so 10 years ago, like.
And then there's fog, and then there's eggs.
Yeah, yeah. Like you analyze words.
Fog, 2 G's and eggs.
Yeah.
I love that you guys are talking about that, because that was the line that actually grabbed me and finally brought me in. So Dan, I'm watching it here. I actually finished it, and Dan's sending me this text analysis. It's very long over text, and my response is 1G and fogs, 2G.
Right.
Eggs.
It's great, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And then actually, so Dan, I have it over there. Dan gave me a copy of the libretto. So Dan's seen it literally around a dozen times. I've seen it.
Oh, at least, yeah. Because I wrote my undergraduate thesis on it. I got I got a C- because I had no idea what the thing was about. That was like the 10th time, and then I felt like I figured it out, and then I felt like I figured it out again, but I figured something else out. That's happened about 15 times, so I'm just kind of rolling with it at this point.
To be fair, it's never supposed to be that.
I'm always figuring good stuff out.
Wait,
it's like it's primo stuff, but
that's a still. John is holding up a still image from the rest of his shit.
Oh, okay.
Of him dripping the
yeah,
red paint on my face. The thing that's so hard about it, and I'm really surprised you couldn't summarize it, is because the story doesn't take place as the piece is going on, really. I mean, it's being told, but sort of at secondhand, seemingly. And so it's really more important the way the person who's speaking is processing this story, the plot, than that you get to see it. So it's, because it's about a bank robbery, and, it's like if someone said, hey, I'm going to show you a bank, it's basically this is.
It's like They Live by Night meets
right
something that's very much not like They Live by Night.
Right. I mean, being told this about a bank robbery, you're not going to get that from experiencing it. You have to learn from other methods, because the other part is that Bob wanted the audio to be, the speaking to be a part of the sound of the music. It wasn't like there's music underneath and then there's Bob talking on top of it. Bob is singing as a part of the time music.
It's like mixed very low.
Right.
Like
exactly.
relative that would be on a pop record or something.
And that's on purpose.
Mm.
So there are multiple levels of kind of making it more diaphanous in a way to try to get you to think of the sound of his voice more so than, and so another way is that the text isn't directly intelligible easily. I mean, just even the words he chooses.
Right. But the stuff that is most, or at least was most directly intelligible to me the first few times was like in the bar, there's that whole thing about kind of, on the one hand, sort of the theological implications of speech, on the other hand, the arbitrariness of speech and the inability to access meaning, which that's.
So also look at the stylings of how the words are structured in each of the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
The living room is a talk show. It's a dialogue. Mm-hmm. The sheriff and his wife. The bar is a series of sermons, where one character is basically proselytizing to the other characters within earshot and also within the world. So there's a use of perspective in the way that Bob wrote the piece that's very unusual. And also, again, remember that there's a camera and everything's being seen through a camera. So, David, there is a bank robbery.
Well, yes, I know. I know it is. I mean,
it's not about a bank robbery.
Okay. Yes. Right. Okay.
In its simplest terms, it's about two musicians who are stopping in a city in the Midwest to play their usual gig at the lounge of the Holiday Inn or the motel. And they are the catalysts whenever they come into town for the town kind of going a little crazy. But within all of that is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And the best way I can summarize it is, and this is the famous quote, it's a comic opera about reincarnation. And it really is, mostly it's about states of being and not necessarily following, but each episode is a loop, is a complete cycle. So there's 7 reincarnation cycles, with the last major one being at the end of the backyard, which brings you back to the park. Other than that, it's hard to say that it's about anything.
Right, which was my point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I would say it's like about the lack of aboutness, right? Like,
well, it's not about
like very aggressive. Like he wants you to take the things in as texture.
Not Seinfeld.
Yeah, it's not Seinfeld, right?
So the bank robbery doubles. The bank robbery doubles as the perfect work of art.
Right.
Right. So another major thing is the duality. There's always a separate state. There's always a contrary or complementary state.
Right.
The 2 dogs are named Permanence and Impermanence for a reason.
What?
2 dogs.
That's new information to me. Like that the dogs were the named Permanence and Impermanence.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, well, of course it makes sense now that you say it.
Yeah.
They're actual dogs. The
dogs in the bank.
Well, you know,
the dogs are used as a distraction when the bank robbery is happening.
Well, it makes even more sense to say that that when after a drink or two, Buddy talks this way. Yeah. You know.
Right.
It's so
Right. Poor Ron. He's got my copy from college. He's probably got like two other books worth of wrong information that I wrote in the margins trying to figure everything out.
Well, you know, it's like, you know, well-used copies. You know,
Right.
it's like,
Here's an example. I don't know if you could see all the notes on there. So the note that he had on the actually where is
It's gonna be embarrassing.
Okay, so again, 1 G in frogs, 2 G's in eggs, and he wrote next to it right there G/God ? So there's everything. So
that's what gets you a C-.
Well, there's the deal is that there's
it's the question mark that did you in. You put an exclamation point, B-, maybe B+.
Poor Donald Mengay had to read 20 pages of that.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, that's the thing is there is cosmology. It's just where you end up having to place it, right? It's
happy she is, the traveling salesman says, but boogie woogie, she is not.
I mean, in the backyard, there's all the stuff about Giordano Bruno.
Right.
And man, John, you just blew my mind about the permanence and impermanence. That like that's how deep this thing gets. It's like David and I have played this thing how many times and for how many years? It's like wait, what? The 2 dogs? Oh my god!
Why would the dog stoop to that?
Right.
Yeah.
How could a dog stoop to such a thing?
Well, it wasn't on the highway.
Right.
I did just want to show, since I don't know if you can see this.
I kind of see it.
Yeah, these are the notes for the score that I play, and it just it's so vague. It says GD 13/4, and then like this, it's like B flat 5/4 reggae, and like that's literally it. Like, so it's like there's definitely like a structure to the music, but like it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna do this. Actually, just the other one, just to show you. So like the bar, it starts off with a bossa. So like there's some kind of bossa nova thing going on, but then it gets to a section where I literally just wrote universe on the side of the paper with squiggly lines.
Is that the cowlick? Crash, left, crash.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yes,
exactly what it is.
Well, and like the comedic
Left,
timing,
forward. Right?
the comedic timing when it's like, you know, it's all of this like craziness, and you know, this is where the music is just going all over the place, and it is the fire, measureless. It is all presence. It is what we know. It is complete. The interchange of light suffices. It is the knowable and unbounded. It is the fullness without desire. It is the decided, the interchange of. It is the decided, the interchange of. Light is final and suffices. Light is final and suffices. Put a break, and it goes right back to the boogie, and it goes, just a sip or two, and Bodhi talks this way. The gift of chemistry. Which is, I don't know, I interpret that as he's drunk. And
if I do that part right, I get the audience to laugh after that.
Yeah.
it's meant to be an outrageous sermon.
Right.
And what Buddy is doing is Buddy is basically the only person of color in the town. He has to defend himself. And part of the defense is that is when Rodney goes on the attack, because Rodney knows that Buddy has been selling the boogie woogie lessons to Baby and basically bankrupting Rodney. Right. Buddy comes back with this sermon that brings in God and fire and brimstone and cows and all this other stuff, which shuts Rodney up very, very quickly. So then there's a whole diversion about television, which naturally is how Buddy has been selling the boogie woogie lessons. And that
I thought the television thing, like the first 5 or 6 times I read that, I just presumed that like it just stopped, and then Robert Ashley was just kind of like going off as Robert Ashley for like, I thought that entire sermon was his actual religious beliefs, probably the first 3, 4 times.
It's Bob talking about trying to make Perfect Lives as an opera for television.
Right.
So a secret of Bob's, and Mimi was obviously one of the engines, is people would give Bob money to do things, not fortunes, but Bob would receive. I mean, almost everything he did was commissioned or supported in some way. I agree that there was never another opportunity, nor do I think the circumstances aligned in such a way that he could do what we did when we did Perfect Lives. But the whole thing about television is about video art and about television without it being television, made alone in a word or without industry.
Right.
And he was a video pioneer. It was actually Phil McKenna who did a lot of the pioneering, and Star Sutherland out here as well. But I mean, Bob thought about video for a long time, made music with roots in the ether, incorporated video into various performances. When I stepped in, I was the television guy. I was the video artist whose work was on television. My great master was Nam June Paik, who had 1 foot in the broadcast world and 1 foot in the art world. The circumstances that Bob's talking about in the sermon about television is very much about the making of an opera for television. And so the lessons, when we made the lessons as a condensed sort of abstracted pilot, my desire was to kind of go in and as if you could look at a multi-track recording of all of the impulses that are flowing through Perfect Lives. That's the lessons. You're seeing a true deconstruction of the templates, the landscapes, the environments, the characters, but all taken apart and not necessarily well put back together. Hey guys, I'm going to have to jump off, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's thanks for swinging by, John. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, and I'm sure you guys are going to go for hours after this.
We'll see. We just got a French press, so it might happen.
Okay.
All right, take care.
Good to see you, John.
Thanks, John.
David and Dorian, good to see you. Take care.
Well, that's been the legendary John Sanborn.
And that's the end of part 1 of our increasingly growing Perfect Live series. This time we met with John Sanborn, David Kulma, and Dorian Wallace. Join us next time with part 2, in which we talk to Dorian Wallace and David Kulma, also known as the duo Trystero, as we talk about Perfect Lives, other music of theirs, and more, and more, and more, and more.